Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Body Wisdom Wednesday. I'm Josia Tamir Crossley, your host, and I'm just going to take one moment while we're getting started here to share this to our Facebook group so that the women in there can see it as well. And so just bear with me here for a moment. If you're watching, please say hello in the comments below. Okay, we just lost Irene. Oh dear. My goodness. Hi, Sue. Good morning. Hey, I think we'll have Irene back here in a moment. She maybe her internet just cut out for a moment. Okay, well, I'm gonna introduce her while we're waiting. So good morning. I'm Josia Tamir Crossley. For those of you who are just catching us, jumping on now, and I'm the host of Body Wisdom Wednesday. I work with women who feel exhausted and maybe kind of lost and maybe kind of, hey, you're back. Okay, great.
I'm back. I'm not sure what happened there, but I'm here.
Yeah, sometimes if the internet just cuts out for a moment, but
Yeah, you got a
anyways, we're back.
foggy.
Technology. So I was just introducing us. So I'm glad you're back.
Yeah.
So so I'm Josia Tamir Crossley. I work with women who feel exhausted, maybe a bit lost, maybe a bit stuck in their lives, to help them reconnect with the wisdom of their bodies so that they can find clarity and inspiration and really sustainable energy and purpose. And obviously, I'm also the host of Body Wisdom Wednesdays, and I'm really, really happy to welcome you here this morning to this week's episode. So our focus this week, the episode's called From the Ground Up, and the topic is nervous system healing for joy, resilience, and freedom. And I'm super excited to be joined this morning by a very special guest, Irene Lyon. Hi, Irene.
Hello.
So this is someone who I see as really leading the global movement in helping people better understand trauma and all things nervous system health. She teaches people around the world how to work with the nervous system to transform trauma and heal the body and mind, and to really live more full, creative lives. To date, her online work has helped literally, I think, thousands of people at this point.
Hey, yeah, we're somewhere there, I think.
Yeah, and in over 57 different countries.
57 countries at that last time I checked. More than 10.
Yeah. Amazing. You're really reaching broadly. And I think that's just it's so important. Like, it's such a critical piece in this time. Mm-hmm. So I'm really just, so honored to be able to have you here and speak with you. I want to say also Irene's extensively studied with Peter Levine, who's the founder of Somatic Experiencing. Some of you may have heard of Somatic Experiencing, as it's, getting more well-known out there as well. And also with Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais, the founder of Feldenkrais work, and with Kathy Kane, the founder of Somatic Practice. And I think, Irene, really you have a gift for making this complex kind of scientific stuff just easy and simple for everyone to understand and be able to apply to our lives. So super happy to welcome you here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And hello, everyone who's watching now and the recording probably also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just I want to open it up that if people have questions, whether you're watching the recording or watching us live, please definitely post in the comments and post your questions. If you're bringing something that you're really curious about, post it now, or just as we go, if something comes up, feel free to to post your question, and we'll try to either answer it live right here if you're here with us, or we'll come back to it later and find you. So yeah, so one of the things that I really wanted to touch in with you, Irene, today is just how I think what I've seen in the people that have been able to learn from you is that there's like sometimes just these big ahas of like, wow, I've been struggling with this crazy physical thing, you know, like digestive thing or immune system thing, you know, autoimmune stuff, sometimes more severe things, and that this work actually starts to shift the system in a way that allows that to heal, right? And so I'd love if we could just talk a little, if you just share with us a little bit about how you see kind of the connection between some of these symptoms or even illnesses that we don't typically associate with trauma or nervous system health, and like what's the connection there? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so to understand it, and I'm just going to make sure I don't hear myself. Okay,
I can hear you.
I'm going to put my earbuds in.
Oh, you're getting a little echo.
Yeah. For the delay here. I can hear my.
No worries. Yeah, take your time. Yeah, and there, you know, something I also want to bring in is that there's this thing called the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that came out a few years ago, and that just really is linking things that we really wouldn't have thought to trauma, you know, things like heart disease, diabetes, even like cancer and these kind of things. So yeah, I'd really love to just talk about, you know, what is the connection there? And
so the connection's pretty big. And one of the things that's really groundbreaking right now, and we're seeing this, and this is what the ACE study, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, it's a long one, Adverse Childhood Experiences study. What they realized, and I can go into a bit more of the specifics around that in a second, is that when there has been early childhood stress and trauma, and again, we can get into what those are too, because it's not horrific war zone abuse kind of things. It can be stuff that we consider quite benign and innocuous, but it can put the system into high level stress. Right. So when we are living in a high level stress as little ones, and we keep that with us, because typically time actually does not heal this stuff. It has to be worked on very specifically as we are learning. It is that the systems that govern immune health, heart health, our muscular health, everything. Like it's hard to convey this, but everything, hormonal health,
all the systems of the body,
health,
right?
Yeah. Everything, every single human system that a human has, basically, will be affected by the nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, and I'll talk about that in a second, being, I like to say, out of whack, or the technical term is dysregulated. So now we have to go back one step further, and that is we have something called an autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means automatic, and many people here would have probably heard of the fight-flight mechanism. So big threat comes in, we adrenalize, we try to fight off the bad guys, or we run away from the bad guys or girls, or, you know, that proverbial saber-toothed tiger that's chasing us, which doesn't really happen anymore in our day and age, but that's kind of the
There's other stressors, right, that are sort of our system reads as similar to that.
You got it. Like deadlines, there's no food, there's not enough money. How am I going to support my kids? How am I going to support myself? Being shouted at. Then, of course, real abuse, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, injuries, you know. So things that put us into a stress reaction. What we know is that the human system is not meant to stay in that survival stress. It's meant to go into it. And then if I use my hands here, like as an example, it's meant to come down. If we are living in a situation from young age, and we're even seeing in utero, so for little ones inside of mom and she's stressed, the system can't keep revving at that high fight, flight level. It's actually not efficient energy-wise.
Right. Yeah, we're just always up here kind of burning all this energy.
Exactly,
right?
which is where burnout comes in, which is where overwhelm comes in, which is where adrenal fatigue comes in. They're all the same thing.
Yeah.
So what occurs, and it's clever, but it also comes at a cost, is our system goes into the third F. So there's fight, flight, and then there's freeze. And I know you understand that because you've gone through the work. But the shutdown or the freeze response is like the human equivalent of hibernating, right? It puts us into this really low, slow, metabolic. It preserves energy. It keeps us safe. But the trouble with being in a freeze physiology is it taxes our nervous system. It taxes our organ systems. It doesn't allow us to repair cells. It doesn't allow our gut to stitch back up at night so that it can be healthy. It doesn't allow our blood to flow freely, or our lymph, which helps us clean out all the toxins in our body.
Right. Because it's still kind of an emergency state, right? It's not a state that we're meant to be hanging out in. It's like that state of like, I'm still in an emergency. And there's like this energy underneath it of I need to get away. And
definitely. It's like I've got my glass of water here. It's like the fight and the flight is the water. And then if I was to like put a lid on it, that'd be the freeze. But the fight flight is still under that freeze.
Yeah, it might still be shaking and kind of wanting to,
It's like it's there. And so what we know is that when someone is living in this combo survival system where there's fight and flight that haven't been healed, I'll be simple there. If they haven't been healed, and there's the freeze on top of it, over time, that literally is toxic to the body from a chemical point of view. And it basically, the best thing I can think of, it's like a machine that just hasn't been oiled. It's trying, it's dusty, it's gross, there's things are just getting tripped up. And so what occurs, how's that for a visual? It's like an old bike where you haven't, cleaned the spokes and gotten dust and dirt out of it. It's just, you can make it work, but it doesn't feel good when you pedal that.
Right. And it's like the lubrication of all the things that come when we actually are able to come into deep rest.
Exactly. And repair, rest, digest. And so the autonomic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze. It also governs digestion and heart rate and blood pressure and immune system and reproductive health and how our brain processes things and our memory and our fear response. So what occurs is if we're staying stuck in those fight, flight, freeze pieces and aren't aware of it, it will, over time, and this is what the ACE study is pretty much proven. It's not even showing. It has proven it. There's been enough study of this study. It's proven that the system, adult health, or later in life health will suffer. And we suffer based on our genetics.
Right.
So for example, I can become super stressed to the point of like exhaustion, and I will never have gut problems because it's just not in my family lineage of right where my husband.
That's how the epigenetics kind of plays out. It's like
his gut goes.
Sure, genetics have an effect, but this is why, right?
Yeah. Whereas my thing is like my skin rashes up. Like I have a skin thing. My skin's obviously fine now, but when you see, so everyone's going to have a different thing, and so a common thing that we'll know is humans will have different ailments. Some people are more prone to mental illness. Some people are prone to autoimmune, like MS, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. Other people are very prone to heart disease. Other people are very prone to cancers. And what the ACE study has shown is that all those things I just mentioned and more are connected to early childhood adversity. So if that adversity isn't addressed, isn't treated, and this is going to sound harsh, but it's true, we will end up getting sick.
Right.
And if you think about it, Josiah and everyone watching, how many people do we know that just die of old age?
It's rare. Yeah.
Very rare. I get shivers thinking about it. Usually we're diagnosed with something, we're sick, and then complications lead us to die. Whereas, there's a great study actually, and you may be familiar with it because you've learned with me, the Rosetto study, the Rosetto effect. And this is a study, so I'll tell it because it's really good. And it's actually in one of my series that we're going to talk about in a second. But here's what happened. In the 50s in the United States, people the main cause of death for men, because they studied the men, was heart disease. Stroke, heart disease, heart attack. People were, that's how people were dying.
Yeah.
And there were these doctors who somehow came across this little tiny town on the eastern seaboard of the United States called Roseto. And it was a town filled with Italian immigrants. They literally came to America, late 1800s, I think, and formed this little town. They called it Roseto, which is what their town was in Italy. And as word got out about the promised land, more and more Italians came over on the boat and formed this little town. What they realized is that the doctors that were there, nobody was dying of heart attack in the 1950s, when that was the leading cause of death for men. And they're like, that is not possible. Like, how is that possible? What the heck are they doing? Because then they went to the town next to the Rosetans, filled with Irish immigrants, and they were dying of heart disease. They worked the same work. They worked in these quarry mines, so bad environment, coal. They all drank a lot. They smoked a lot. They were all overweight. They didn't exercise, and their diets weren't that great. The Rosetans, as well as the people in this other town. And so what they did, they went in and they realized that these Italians were still living the culture of old Italy. They went to church.
They had a community as well.
They had community. They had what they call civic organizations. So they had like 22 civic organizations for this population of only 1,000, I think. So people were together. People ate together. You'd see 3 generations living in a household together. And we know this now. Humans need other people. What's tricky, however, is that in our current culture, a lot of our family systems have been abusive. They've been toxic. And so it actually isn't safe and wholesome to live with our immediate family.
Right. Yeah, there's so much intergenerational trauma.
So much going on. And so it actually, at this point, it wouldn't make sense for someone to hypothetically just move back in with their parents and bring the grandparents in and expect that that's going to become healing. We know, and there's probably some people watching this laughing, going, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. Right. But back then, what that did is it actually made the nervous system. So those Italians, as we think of them, there's a part of the nervous system that heals us. And that's part of our parasympathetic. It's part that engages us socially with others.
Yeah, social engagement system, right.
And it actually calms our heart down, and it puts us in that healing rest digest mode. And so those Rosetans were pretty much living in healing mode, and so their systems repaired every day.
Even though they were having the same other experience.
And this really debunked lifestyle, because we've been so obsessed with, eating well and meditating and doing all the right things. And yet you look at this population and they did nothing like that. They didn't pray. They went to church, but it was simpler then. Like church was very simple back in the 50s, at least in that kind of Italian Catholic world. And so I look at that, and when we now know the science with the ACE study, it actually connects with what occurred in that Italian community. They were healing themselves without even knowing it.
Well, and there's something to be said for. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and then the genetic expression for disease didn't come here, because here's what's interesting. I follow that community. No longer did they have those same statistics.
It's
so now in, where are we, 2019, most of the generations from then have probably passed away. Their children didn't stay, or they didn't keep up that lifestyle. And now when they go in there and they look at that community, they are getting the same illnesses as everybody else in North America.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting.
It is interesting.
So just that's something about that old culture and the community. And it's interesting because I think it's one of the things that happens when we start to uncover our trauma and our childhood, experiences and that kind of thing, especially for parents, or we have parents, which all of us do, is there's this kind of like guilt thing that can come in there, and shame, around, and sort of like a feeling of abnormality maybe. And And that like, it's so interesting just to notice that like, I'm guessing that these people who were living in that community and who weren't getting sick, like they probably weren't perfect parents either. But the fact that like having that community support around makes such a difference. It's like, oh, you know, the child has maybe a bad experience with mom for a moment because she's crabby, but there's somebody else that they can go to and be in connection with and receive that connection, and just that co-regulation, right, that can happen when there's more adults available to kind of bounce off of. And how, so I feel like it's just, I just want to like land that for people, is that that, you know, we're living in a time, in a culture where it's like, or a society, I don't even like to call it a culture because I feel like the culture is actually so lacking, but like in a society where we're so isolated, you know, and we're really up against all odds at this point. And so I think, you know, bringing in this work that you're offering is one of the key. It's just so key to be able to start to learn how to work with our own nervous systems, and like what that can open up, you know, what that's opened up for me in my life. For sure, you know, starting to open up the nervous system, because then it's like we can start to see possibility and potential. We have more access to our creativity, and you know, there is doorways that are always opening for more support. And so it's, you know, when we can come in this way and work with the nervous system, it's like, okay, now there's more doorways opening. And how do we start to, with this knowledge, like recreate that's a big question in my life. How do we start to recreate that culture and community so that we actually have, you know, beyond just the sort of isolated sphere? Yeah.
That's a great question. Because I think about it often, and I don't think, my personal opinion, I don't think we'll ever go back to that kind of community. And if we do, it's going to take a long time. Of years. Quite a few generations. And the reason why is because the way that we've set up our living situations, it can't just be shifted like that. But what can happen is when people, and the other thing too is we're kind of a melting pot of culture, of differences in how we were raised. And so I've seen people try to set up intentional community. They call them intentional communities. And it doesn't, at this point, it's really hard for them to work because there's differing perspectives on how to raise a child, on what is okay and not okay, on boundaries, on discipline. You know, if we think about those Italians, there was, I can guarantee you, even though I wasn't there was strong discipline, there were chores, there were boundaries, there were rules. That has really lacked in our world now. And I'm seeing a lot of this in my clients' kids. There's this general anxiety going on in a lot of children. And it's because they don't have discipline and boundaries and rules in a way that, say, you and I might have been brought up with in our parents. It doesn't mean militant, but they need help knowing what is right and wrong. And so when you get these communities where there isn't a common understanding of what a human being needs to basically be created and be regulated and strong and independent, but also empathetic, you get these clashings. So I almost see the future communities of us, of the world, being like these micro communities where, you know, people have to, in my opinion, learn how to become regulated in their own systems, which is what, you know, the work that you've done, that I do, is really about. Because when you become more regulated and more healed from past traumas and all the stuff, we start to attract those who are meant to be in our lives.
Yes, exactly. And like health, right?
Experienced that, but that.
Yeah, well, the healthy nervous system, then that's kind of what I was trying to say before. It's like, then we recognize health in our systems more, because let's talk about that actually. How, like, what happens when we experience trauma. And for those of you who are just jumping on now, hello and welcome. And I'm just here with Irene Lyon, a specialist in all things nervous system and healing trauma. And so I really want to welcome you to join into our conversation. If you have questions, please post in the comments. But let's talk about how, you know, when we experience trauma and then our nervous system kind of, you know, maybe we grew up with it in our home, or maybe it's even like a one-time kind of shock experience that we have. How does that change our system so that we might then kind of almost like magnetize those experiences, or welcome those, not welcome isn't quite the right word, but
it kind of happens that way in some ways. So the key is to distinguish the different types of trauma. So if someone had what we call a secure, safe, regulated home life, doesn't mean it's perfect, but the child, the infant, the baby, the teenager, they are seen for who they are. There's no conditions. It's 100% secure, safe. Doesn't mean that there won't be rules and chores and boundaries, but there's none of that BS where it's like, part of my language, where it's like, if you don't do this, we're not going to give you that.
Yeah, shaming or
in that kind of toxic shame. Or when you get an A on your report card, you're going to get $10. But if you get a C, you don't get anything, right? Believe it or not, that level of interaction with a child sets them up for a lot of troubles, because we actually consider that early. We would consider that early trauma. It is abusive to put those conditions on a kid. And so there's those sort of more insidious things. And then there's actual adversity. There's, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, seeing parents fight and scream and maybe being abusive to each other. So when we're brought up in an environment like that, it is highly unsafe for a young child. Even for an infant, when they can't understand, they can feel the energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. And so what happens is that little person grows up understanding danger, how to protect from danger, how to be hypervigilant. They also become some will become highly attuned to energy, because they literally have to walk on eggshells to not upset mom or dad.
Right.
And so that little being becomes like a ninja in an interesting way. And this is why we see a lot of people who were brought up in that kind of toxic environment, highly sensitive to people's energies,
Exactly.
just in a dysregulated way. Sensitivity is key. If humans didn't have sensitivity, we wouldn't survive very long. Like if my drink here was off and moldy, I would want to know that and not drink it. I would get sick. So, the other day there was a piece of steak that I ate from our fridge, and something didn't smell right. And I got one bite in my body, and I'm like, I don't think I should eat that anymore. Something was off. And I ended up having a bit of a tummy ache. It's a good thing I didn't eat the whole piece, because I would have probably had food poisoning.
Yeah.
So, we have these sensitivities for a reason. But then there's a sensitivity in the instance of a child having to protect themselves from their parents, the very caregivers who are supposed to protect them. So if we grow up in that kind of situation, that autonomic nervous system that I talked about at the beginning, the fight, flight, and freeze, will be literally like full on, on. And
all the time. Right?
All the time. And that will be seen in either high shutdown, so true introversion, reading all the time, disconnecting, not want to be with people, just everything is like this, or hyper. This is what ADD is. Looking for danger, can't sit still, not able to just sink, because they're literally looking for that next threat. And so what occurs when there's that kind of early environmental circumstance is we become, to go back to your question about relationship, we will either look for situations that we know as similar to our experience growing up. So this is where people will get into the same relationships as they saw.
Right, because it's familiar, right?
It's familiar. It's like, even though it's unsafe, it's comfortable because it's familiar. They know how to react and respond to being in a relationship where there's rage or there's no affect, right? There's both. Like if mom and dad showed no emotion, it's pretty safe to find a partner that shows no emotion. Or if you were in a family system where there was a lot of rage, a lot of unhealthy anger, that will feel normal, and you know how to respond to that. So what happens is that we get into these sort of cycles where we will seek that out, and we're not even seeking it out consciously.
Right. It's kind of a subconscious, just the nervous system is almost like looking for that, right? Yeah.
It's looking for it's looking for the map
Yeah.
that it's familiar with. It knows how to drive that route, and it's just going to keep going that route. And so part of healing these early stressors, these early adversities, is in many ways starting with the system, starting with your own system, and being able to really listen, like, how does the body respond when it sees another person?
Yeah.
And not a partner necessarily, not a friend, but just like, can
Another
you notice when someone walks into the room, even at like the library,
Yeah.
be anywhere, and
Yeah.
start to really listen to the physiology. So part of the work that I do is teaching folks how to listen to their internal physiology. Because when we're little, we don't know how to listen to it. All we know is something bad is happening, and we're all going to die.
Yeah.
You know, metaphorically.
Yeah.
And the system will clamp, and we're so embrace and protect. And so one of the things that's really important when we're adults and we want to heal this is we have to get familiar with how our physiology responds to people.
Yes, exactly. And environment, just even environment, right? I think that's one of the first things that you teach in your course is that like orienting. And for me, it was huge for me because I'd always regulated, I was a meditator and a yogi, yoga teacher. And I'd always regulated internally. Like I had such a powerful ability to regulate myself as long as I could go inside and didn't need to interact with anyone or really my environment. And I even had glasses before, so I think it was like sort of like another level of like my body, like I don't want to see what's happening outside of me. And so when I started to get curious and like really learn how to do that, like notice my physiology in relationship to the environment, and it was huge, groundbreaking, like change in my system.
Yeah, and so simple.
Yeah, exactly.
It can be. Like, it's interesting. I wonder, when you started learning orienting, was there any point in time when you did that where it felt like super, like, this is weird?
Oh yeah, like it was dysregulating for me at first. I was like, I don't want to do this. My system was like, no, this is not a good idea. But I knew, I was like, well, that's interesting. I just approached it with curiosity, which I think that's like one of the biggest keys in this work, right? Is to just come in curious, and continue to be curious with what's happening. And then, eventually it shifted and now it's, a big tool for me to ground myself. Yeah. As it should be, right?
It's a good thing that you mentioned that. Because when we have had traumatic experience, and it doesn't have to be, again, big accidents, it's these subtle things, right? Mom and dad always fought after dinner. So I just kind of kept myself inside and didn't look out there, as one example. As a human organism, as actually any organism, we need to be aware of our environment, or else we might get hurt. We might get into an accident.
Well, in nature, in the wild, right? We would.
Exactly. But you see it here in a cityscape. I can tell you, it drives me crazy. I rarely listen to the news, but at night or in the morning when there's rush hour, they do the traffic report and you hear all these accidents and all these pedestrians being hit by cars. I'm like, how is that possible? Unless there's a real freak accident. There is no reason, if a person is outside walking, that they should not be aware of what is coming. If you're listening, you'll hear something coming your way. And so our attunement, not only to ourselves, but to the space around us, is really lacking. And when we've had this early misattunement and the environment wasn't safe and we had to go insular, we will literally block it out.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, my experience is that it was kind of like having come out of it, from being really in, it was like being like almost like a tunnel vision, like a horse with blinders on, kind of. It's like, this is like our natural state is like open and connected to everything. And it's like this, like a root bound plant, kind of like, I don't want to, and so
anything. And that actually goes beautifully back to what we were talking about community, is I don't think we have to go back to living in tribal culture. When we have that connection to our environment and we heal that orientation to our external, we start to see that it's all like community is all around us. It doesn't have to be people that live in our house or feed our children. It can just be seeing the things outside and taking care of the things outside. And I know one of the questions you asked me before we got on email was, environmental health. And one of the reasons I'm pretty certain we do not take care of the environment, and I mean not just from a big scale, but like garbage that's left outside, it's because we don't understand that is the environment and I'm leaving it there. And again, another example, I live by a very popular beach in Vancouver, BC, and there is no reason why when people have their picnics on a beautiful Sunday that they should leave their garbage on the grass. But every Monday morning I go down to my little walk, garbage everywhere. That doesn't make sense to me. And it probably doesn't make sense to you or probably any of the people watching this. But it's like that makes me go, it's not because they're intentionally trying to harm the planet.
Yeah.
They just don't know. They don't see the connection.
Yeah, exactly. But like relationship, right? It's like the loss of that relationship because we're doing this instead of like being in connection with,
and there's no forward thinking to what could this do.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've seen the crows down there trying to pick apart plastic pieces of, food boxes. And I'm like, stop doing that. And so it that impact is really rooted in people's care for themselves and how they see the environment. And it really, in my world and in our world, it goes back to that nervous system still being in traumatic stress.
Exactly.
Because when we're living in that traumatic stress and we're in that shutdown mode, not only is our physiology not well, we do not see. We're dissociated.
Exactly. We're not seeing, we're not connected, we're dissociated. Yeah, exactly.
And so
that brings up
huge part.
Well, just the global, like in terms of like how we treat each other as well, right? And like Pema Chodron says that, the only way that we can ever harm someone is when we're not actually there. Basically, we're not actually conscious of what we're doing. So it's this dissociation, this kind of shutdown that. Yeah.
So that, it's a micro, if we look at the child, we go back to early physiology, how is a child formed? They need safety, they need connection, they need boundaries. It's a micro of the macro.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And, you go into that more philosophical point of view, really for our planet to get better, each person has to work with their own traumas.
Exactly.
If just that happened, and that seems, it's like, if just that happened, things would really shift. But
yeah, I agree.
To be that awareness and that, oh, that's why I do that when I create policy, or that's why I do that when I go to that demonstration and I put anger into the fight, which really isn't helping anything. Right. So there's all these ways in which we see our survival physiology come out in social justice and policy making, politics and education and healthcare. And really it comes down to, I think, each person learning about their nervous system and healing their own stuff, because when we do that, it actually ripples out.
Exactly.
It affects the collective.
Exactly. Yeah. And we all, I always think, even looking at some of these leaders who I'm just like, who we shall not name here, but, it's like everyone wants to be happy. And we just have all these like crazy coping strategies for trying to make ourselves feel okay or make ourselves feel happy, so I think like when this work is such a key to be able to actually start to access like what makes us, I don't want to say happy is kind of a dangerous word, but free. Exactly.
Yeah.
Freedom and being able to experience our full range of being human. And
definitely. And when we have that freedom, what we start to realize is that we don't get triggered by things that we see. And we actually start to have empathy for the things that we see that we might not agree with.
Yeah, exactly.
And, there's a million examples we could pull out, but I won't. But it's like, there's a reason why people do the things they do.
Exactly.
And I've done many videos on that, and You know, we have this sense that someone's born evil, and that is not true. We are formed based on our environment because we have to protect and survive and play a situation that isn't good. We have to make it good somehow, and that's how our behavior, that's how our actions come out.
Exactly.
Whether we become a businessman or woman, or whether we become an actor or an actress, or we start a nonprofit and we work ourselves into the ground, like all these ways that we behave are often rooted in how we were raised, and us either defying or going with. Like, it's an interesting thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I feel like we could tangent down there.
Oh yeah, we could so tangent.
One thing I wanted to touch into is just, so like we've talked kind of about the adverse childhood experiences and you know, I think we're all aware, probably all of you guys who are listening are aware of, like, obviously if we have a car accident or, you know, something more severe happen like that would equal trauma. And what I know that something that you've done, I think, with your work that's really important is sort of broaden that definition of trauma even a little bit more to look at, like, so if you could just talk a little bit about what happens when, like, say nothing like bad happens, but maybe our primary caregiver doesn't quite have
the ability to attune to us.
Yeah.
So there's often this thought that, and let's just say an accident will cause trauma, right? And I use this example when I teach, you know, person A and person B get into the exact same car accident. One person walks away, they're totally fine. The other person walks away and their whole life is destroyed. Exact same car accident. There's no injuries, there's no broken bones, there's no hospitalization, but there's enough of a shock. The person who walks away and is completely undone, if we go back into their history, we will often see that there was some form of early and developmental trauma.
Exactly.
That could be, and it usually is, what we were talked about a second ago, unsafe situations. But a child will see unsafety or lack of safety or threat. It'll be the same if it is physical abuse to it being mom just being checked out all the time,
exactly.
or dad.
Yeah.
But you know, the mother is, you know, still the most important figure because she birthed and carried, and that's where that connection is. So we'll speak to the mom factor. So if mom is not healed in her own system from her early traumas, which at our point right now in our lifeline of the human species, for most of us, that is not the case.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's just the truth. You know, there are now babies that I know being born where the mothers have done the trauma work. And that is brilliant, in my opinion, or they're doing the work while they're pregnant or while they're infants or toddlers. And it's making a huge difference, right?
Yeah,
but for most of us who are in our age bracket, chances are mom didn't know, and that's not her fault. We just didn't know we just didn't know. And so if she is, let's say, unwell herself, triggered by her child because she had troubles with her mother, what occurs is something called misattunement and some form of unsecure attachment. And there's many different attachment styles. I won't get into them, but suffice it to say, when we don't have that strong attunement and that secure attachment, it is a threat to the child and to the infant.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it can be as simple as, for example, there used to be, and there still is, it's less now, the concept of when a baby is crying, you let them cry until they stop.
Right. That idea has been so...
Cry it out is what it's called.
Yeah.
And what that means is, back in the day, not that long ago, they thought babies can teach themselves how to self-soothe. Well, what happens is eventually the baby does stop crying, but they stop because they've hit threshold. Their adrenaline is they can't handle it anymore. So the system is smart. It shuts them down into freeze.
Which is what you were talking about earlier, that freeze place. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that they're calm now.
So in other words, they have calmed themselves down, but from a state of shock, as opposed to healthy coming down with a caregiver that's there to teach them how to slowly bring their physiology down. So there's many people in this world who are adults who have anxiety, depression, chronic health problems, especially fibromyalgia, autoimmune. If you think about that situation over the course of 3 years, because that's the most important time that when the nervous system is growing from like day 1 to 3, when that basically the autonomic nervous system is learning how to self-regulate in those first 3 years. If you think about that situation daily, hourly for 3 years, that creates a person who's very highly dysregulated.
Right. Yeah.
There's still some
and may have had no impact, no like clear trauma, right?
Yeah,
It just
none.
mom wasn't showing up.
You know, there was food, there was shelter,
yeah.
there was a safe place that was a house, for example, or whatever, but the interaction was not, it wasn't even that it was unsafe. It wasn't accurate.
Right. Just not tuning in, not noticing what baby was needing, or exactly.
So what occurs is that attunement, and I'll use a real simple example, but if you think about temperature regulation, I often see kids in grocery stores who are freaking out. It's usually in the winter, and they've been brought in their strollers, all bundled up.
Right. They're
They come
sweating.
inside.
Yeah.
They don't take the clothes off. They don't take the toque off. They don't take the mitts off. And little one is basically overheating. Someone who has attunement will see that. They'll see the cheeks really red. They'll see the discomfort. They'll see the, and that's cue for the caregiver. Oh, little Susie's hot. Let's take some of your clothes off. That lets her know, oh, you hear me, you feel me, you hear my scream, you know what the scream means. That then brings her system down. It's the same with if a child is hungry or doesn't want to eat anymore, but they're being forced to bottle. So these are all could be very triggering examples.
Totally. All the parents out there are like, oh my God. Yeah. We all do it sometimes. It's okay. It's more about like right. You know, it's more about
knowing.
Most of the time, right? Meeting them and being aware and noticing if this is happening for you.
Exactly. And the thing is that if we don't have attunement to our own bodies, it's hard for us to attune to our little ones. And so this is why this happens. It isn't because a parent is trying to be malicious and overheat their baby. It's just that lack of attunement is there. And so when we didn't get that, we'll go back to like adult that are struggling now. When we didn't get that, our job as adults, if we want to heal that early trauma, because it is trauma, is we need to learn how to listen to our own bodies again.
Yeah.
Because we were not taught from an early age how to listen. This affects how we feed ourselves, our hunger cues, our fatigue levels, being able to regulate our temperature, being able to be active when we should be active, slow down when we should slow down. So it really gives us, it throws off our accurate capacity to know what we need. We take that into career, relationship, creativity, health, self-care. This is where it's hard to almost convey to people how big it is when we learn how to listen to our nervous system. And our body's physiology, it really does ripple into all these other parts of our lives.
Exactly. And it's like, it's so simple, but it's so
simple, but
huge.
it's not.
Yeah.
Exactly. It takes work. You think about it, you're trying to rewire and create a new map for something that should have happened when you were young.
Little.
And so,
really young. Yeah.
Really young. So it's a project. Like I see it when I work with my students, I'm like, this is a project. You're apprenticing to be better at listening to your body.
Exactly. And it's like a body wisdom apprenticeship.
It totally is. And when you do that, not only does your system heal, but your brain heals, your relationships heal, your creativity comes back, just because you're giving yourself the attunement that you might never got.
Exactly. It's so amazing. It's such an incredible gift.
Yeah, it's cool. And the one thing that just came to mind, a lot of times there's this confusion where someone goes, oh man, yeah, that happened to me. Mom was not well. And I've accepted that. And, yep, she didn't know what to do. There's this thought that you have to then confront the parent if they're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessary. I've found that that actually can make things worse. It's putting us back into that victim mode. And it's like, you just have to accept they didn't know, because they really didn't.
Exactly. They were doing their best, just like we're doing our best, those of us who are parents now. And you know, the more that we can do this work, I think the better is a weird word, but the more we can offer our children, right? The more we can offer the next generation, and then hopefully they'll continue.
Yeah.
But, I would love if you could talk a little bit about we could like talk for hours probably. I'm sure we could just keep going. But I would love if you would talk a little bit about what you're offering in the next.
Going on right now.
Yeah, what's going on right now that people can kind of touch in more with this work and what you're doing.
So once a year, I run my online program called Smart Body, Smart Mind, which you have gone through. And it is, oops. Groups and all that. And I was in private practice for quite a while. And I realized that there was so much information that people needed to understand to do the work well. It was not cost effective for my clients to come in and for me to like lecture them one by one on what we've talked about today and way more. Like there's so much more. And I started to create videos and audios and homework for people to guide them through their nervous system. And long story short, over about 3 years, slowly I added and added and added. And now there's this curriculum called Smart Body, Smart Mind that's 12 weeks long. You could use this, you could take a year to go through the program. There's so much in there. Some people have taken 2 years to go through it. You go at your own pace. You come into the group when we run it. So it's coming up March 26th. It'll go from March 26th to June 23rd. So I will be in there. My team is there. We're all trauma trained in the somatic healing arts. And it is completely virtual and live calls like this, where we have we use Zoom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Zoom, but it's a video conferencing where it's like we're all sitting in a room together, but it's online. And the lessons basically are a blend of my work within somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work, Kathy Kane, somatic practice, and then the work of Moshe Feldenkrais. And so the exercises, it's very practical, are a blend of these very sophisticated neuroplastic healing. I don't like the word technique, but it's an approach to being with the body, learning how to be with your body, how to self-regulate the body, how to come out of survival, out of that fight, flight, freeze. We work with healthy aggression. We work with the body. We work with movement, like you said, orientation, but also being internal. We do some stuff with breath. So it's very comprehensive. It's a great, I'm biased, but it's a very comprehensive program.
It's very comprehensive.
Very comprehensive. At this point, and there's nothing like it in the world. Nobody has combined those three beautiful practices into one. I can, because I'm trained in all of them, and I'm savvy with the online world. So that's kind of what that is.
Incredible offering, really, and to be able to do this work like in our own, in our own homes, and to be able to access it from wherever we are, and to be able to start the journey. And I think this can take you quite far within, you know, being able to start to heal your own nervous system. And some people get in and they find they actually want to also work one-on-one with a therapist.
Yeah.
But I think even just on our own, we can actually, with the different practices, we can actually do a lot.
We can do so much. It actually, I even am starting to realize, as I hear from more of the alumni, how much happens when you have to do the work. That's the other thing. You can't just have the course and hope that it infuses into you. Like you have to show up, you have to practice. You go at your own pace, but you've got to do little increments every week.
Yeah.
It's like learning a new language. You can't learn a new language if you just practice like once every month. And the people that we see who really benefit and really get amazing regulation on board, and their lives completely change. Fibromyalgia heals, autoimmune disorders change, depression goes away, anxiety goes away, people fall in love, people break up with partners that are toxic. Like it really is quite comprehensive, but they're the ones that do the work. Right. So exactly. I'll be very honest, like there has to be some self-driving energy to show up for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So it wouldn't be for you if you need to be in a class, in a classroom to be able to kind of move forward. But if you have that ability to go online, and I think you've done an amazing job of breaking it up into like really small bite-sized pieces. I think often we think, oh, like we need more and more will be better. And I think the way that you've set it up is it's so I want to use the word digestible. Like it's just so, and that, like it doesn't, you definitely don't have to jump in and like do the whole program in the 6 weeks. It like actually less is more, even if you just take like 1 or 2 of the practices and work on those throughout the program and, you know, watch the videos on the education pieces. I think that even doing 1 or 2 of those practices can totally shift your whole system in a huge way.
Yeah. And I think to piggyback on what you said, because of my nervous system lens, that's why the program is so effective, is I've layered it such that it's layered in a regulated way.
Yes.
Right. So it's mimicking what I would want nervous system regulation to look like. So it isn't just all theory for the first 4 weeks. There's a blend. But then as we get towards the 12th week, it's mainly practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it moves through. And of course, when a person joins, they have the content for life. They can come back and redo the program next year and the next year. We've got some people in there that have already been through 8 rounds of Smart Body, Smart Mind. And it's not because they're slow. It's because they realize that this is a lifestyle. And even when you have regulation, you can bring more regulation and more capacity on board. I still do the work myself. I still have old traumas coming up through my body, even though I've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another important thing, is to understand that healing the nervous system isn't like you start on day 1 and you end on day 365. So much stuff that we've stored as humans, not just our own, but our cultures,
generations and generations. Exactly. Yeah.
But what happens is when you get more capacity on board and you understand what's going on in the system, it almost gets exciting when a trauma releases. Do you find that? It's like, and I
oh my God,
I'm starting to shiver. Like, what is this?
Totally. Yeah, because it's like, oh, there's more possibility. It's like, I feel so amazing already compared to how I felt, 5 years ago, even. But like, I know there's still more potential there. There's more room for opening. So it is exciting. It's like, wow, what else is possible, for sure. And it almost is also like it gets exponential in a way, not in like an overwhelming, like, oh my God kind of way, but in actually the opposite way, where it's like, it might feel like overwhelming and oh my God in the beginning, or like now as you're listening, to think about embarking on a journey like this. But that as we build our capacity with the practices, it's like there's just more space, and it's more like, oh, now there's even more space, and now there's way more space, and now it's like so spacious that having some big trauma come up that hasn't processed yet is actually not a big deal. It's just like moving through the system because there's so much space. So it really is exponential in that way. Irene Sue is on here. Sue Reese is asking, she did the program a while back and she's wondering if it's changed much in the last 3 years. And I think it has.
For some reason I can't see Sue's name. That my team chat thing is, how do I get rid of that? Anyway, Hi, Sue. So let me see, has it changed? Yes and no. So the core lessons are the same, but last year we added a bunch on capacity, a bunch on containment. So there are some new things. So last year we added a bunch of new stuff. I changed a bunch of stuff. But the core essence is the same, but there are differences. The other difference this year, we're adding a humongous vault of Q&A questions. So we've answered the most common questions that people have during each module. And so that in itself is like a book that you could read through and learn lots with, Sue. And then the other thing to really understand is that even if the material is the same, when you go back and repeat it, you will find a different layer. Some of my most favorite Feldenkrais lessons, I repeat weekly. And it's not that there's these big epiphanies, it's just, it allows the system to be like, oh, it's like listening to your favorite song. You don't just listen to it once, right? You find different nuances and layers. It's like eating food. So I would say if you can, you got to go with your pace and go with your impulse, but go in there and just see what happens when you repeat some of the older lessons and even relearn and attend a training call, right? Because even though the training call material is the same, each year I'm different. My experiences have been different that year. We have different people in the field. So it's going to create a whole different, I think that's what's really neat about it, is it's not static. It's ever changing. And the more energy in the group, the more healing happens in the group.
Totally. It's like the power of the circle kind of in a way where it's like what one person goes through. That's what Everyone. I've loved about, and I've got so much out of the program, and I haven't been on very many of the Q&A calls or the calls, but whenever I have made it to them, it's amazing. It's like so potent to just like witness you holding space for someone as they ask their question or go through their moment of kind of epiphany, and like that moves energy for the whole group and for everybody that shows up there. So it's really, it's a strong container that you're holding. Yeah.
It's pretty fun. Yeah. And last year we, I think I've become, you learn, we really are seeing this program as education, right? It's not group therapy. It's not one-on-one therapy. The byproduct is healing. The byproduct is a healthy nervous system. But when you really look at what we're doing, people are getting educated. And when that education is there, it changes things so much. And I really became kind of like more of a, I'm going to use this word, it's not the best word, but like militant. It's like, no, like, let's not go back into the past. What is happening right now? Like we have to acknowledge the past, the hurts, the pains that occurred, but that does not help us to go back and ruminate and stay within that victim mode. We need to be in the present moment, orienting to the here and now, and how is our physiology reacting now?
Right. Yeah.
And one of the biggest feats that people make is when they can be with their body in the here and now, they start to realize how quickly things shift. It's the psyche grabbing to the past that makes it hard to shift. And so when our mind is strong and it wants to keep grabbing the stuff that was in the past, it makes it harder to heal. So one of the big things is, how can we really teach everyone and hold the intention that it's okay to just be here?
Yeah.
But then we have to learn how to be here.
Yeah. And how to be with the physiology, and how to regulate, so I think all the tools that are so practical just in that way of, hi, Belinda.
Any other questions? Like
and
I said,
Sue's saying thank you, and she's excited about the thought of coming back to this work. Yay, awesome. So for people who, I'll put a direct link to the what you have right now over the next couple
the
weeks,
Healing Trauma Series
training, right?
Yeah.
And then if people want to jump in the program after that, but I think the free training really gives them a good taste of
definitely watch these videos. So Sue and anybody else, we redid them this year. So we refilmed them. I rewrote them. We brought in prettier graphics, and it's a bit more comprehensive. Pretty graphics are important. But there's 3 videos. The first one is live right now. It's called the Healing Trauma Video Series, video training. The first one's today, the next one's on Friday, the next one's on Monday. And it really gives you a much deeper education around the nervous system. I have analogies, examples. I go over the different types of trauma, signs that someone might have undiagnosed trauma. We get into the ACE study. We get into a bit more about the vagus nerve, like it's pretty comprehensive. And then I go over the blueprint that is kind of what is Smart Body, Smart Mind. So you'll post that link and people can find
I'll
that.
post the link in the comments below when we wrap up here. So so I super recommend you checking it out. And thank you so much for being, if anybody has any more questions, I see there's a few people watching still, definitely post your questions now. And if you're watching the replay, still post your questions and we'll try to jump back and just respond later on. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Irene.
You are welcome so much.
Such a great conversation, and always just super fun to jam with you on this stuff.
And I have to say thank you for continuing to do the work and going your path. It's great to see that shifting and changing for you, and you need more people to do this work. So it's really good.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm excited. I signed up to train with Kathy Kane for 2020. So she's in Vancouver. So I'm super excited about that.
Good.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining us. And
bye.
Yeah, we'll see you next Wednesday on Body Wisdom Wednesday. Josie at Tamira Crossling. I've been here with Irene Lyon. Check out her free healing trauma video series. I'll post the link at the bottom in the comments. And we'll see you soon. All right. Blessings, everybody.
Bye.